Hi, so I'm going to do some more equation solving with you now, but in today's video what I'm going to be looking at with you is solving equations which have got fractions involved in them. And the reason I'm doing this is because I just want to show you that it's actually not that difficult, and sometimes people build it up in their heads because they think, oh, fractions, it's really frightening and I don't know how to deal with them. So I'm going to hopefully show you how to do this in a nice simple way. So if you notice, I've got 4 different questions on the board, and they build with difficulty as we go along. So just remember first of all that a fraction bar is the same as divide. Okay, so fraction bar means divide. So if I've got here x over 3, it means x divided by 3. And if that is equal to 9, I'm saying, well, what number when I divide by 3 gives me 9? And you've got to remember that the inverse operation of divide is to multiply. So remember, if you think back to the video I did before on solving equations, and if you haven't remembered this, please go back and watch that first. But I talked to you about doing the same to both sides of the equation, whatever you're doing. So in this case, and really with all fraction questions to do with equations, we don't want the fraction, we want to deal with that as quickly as possible. And I'll talk to you about the right and the wrong time to do that in a moment. But in this case, we've only got the fraction here to deal with, so we have to undo that process. So x divided by 3 is equal to 9, so we just do the inverse operation, which is to multiply by 3. And we multiply both sides by 3, so x divided by 3 multiplied by 3 just gives me x, and 9 times 3 is 27. Okay, so that one's nice and straightforward. This one's a little bit more tricky because we've got 2 things going on here. We've got 2x divided by 3 equals 7. I would still deal with the fraction first. Okay, we've only got the x term on its own here, so we've got nothing else to do. But let's deal with the fraction first. So the first thing I'm going to do is multiply by 3 again. Won't always be 3, I promise. And when we do that, on this side the 3 disappears from the denominator, so we're just left with 2x, and here 7 times 3 is 21. Okay, then we've got 2x is 21, nice and simple. So what we do is we now do the inverse operation of 2 times x. Remember, 2x means 2 times x, so the inverse of that is to divide by the 2, leaving us with x is equal to, now if you can't do that in your head, write it as 21 over 2, and then if you remember rightly, we talked about this in a previous video, you cancel that down as far as possible. So how many whole ones can you get out of it? Well, 2 goes into 20 10 times, and then you've got 1 left over, so it's 10 and a half or 10.5, depending on how you want to write your answer. Okay, right, now again I'm going to refer to my previous video. I've always said to you with solving equations that you must make sure you get all your x terms on their own on one side and then everything else on the other side. So we always do that first, and even when you've got a fraction, I would say it's probably even more important. Your x term is here with the divide by 4, but you've got plus 3. The first thing you need to do is get rid of that plus 3. Inverse operation, we're going to take away 3 from both sides. If we take away 3 from this side, we're just left with that x over 4, and if we take away 3 from 9, we're left with 6. Okay, and now we've got x divided by 4 gives me 6. Inverse operation, we're going to multiply both sides by 4, and when you do that, 6 times 4 is 24. And there's your answer. Now if you don't do that, the trap that you could fall into is what quite a lot of people will do, is they'll times by 4 and they'll leave it as x plus 3 equals 36, and then when you take away the 3 you're left with 33, and you can see that's not right. And the reason that's not right is because if you multiply by 4 you need to multiply everything through by 4. So that's why I always recommend, if you've got a term in x, which is that thing altogether, any pluses or minuses, get rid of those first and then you can deal with the rest. Now if we look at this question over here, this is a single term because that fraction bar is underneath the whole of that there. Okay, so with this one we must deal with a fraction first because we can't separate out that -3 because that is also over the 5. So the first thing we have to do here is to times by 5. Alright, so if it's a whole term on its own, then you're going to deal with your fraction first. So this was a whole term, this was a whole term, we dealt with a fraction first. Here we had two separate terms, so we dealt with the +3 first and then the fraction. Very important. So if we times both sides by 5, then we're just left with the 2x minus 3, and it's like it's freed, if you like, it's released from the divide by 5. Don't forget to multiply by 5 though, again that's a common mistake. So that is equal to 55. So then 2x take away 3 is 55. So now it's just a simple equation, just like ones that we've done before in the previous video. So we're going to add 3 to both sides. Remember, you want to get rid of the plus or minus bit first. So if we do that, if it's -3, we +3. If we add 3 to 55, we get 58. And then we're going to divide by 2. And if we divide that by 2, we get 29. And it's nice and simple. Okay, so just to recap, fraction gets dealt with first if you've got a single term. If you haven't and you've got more than that, then deal with your plus or minus bit first and then deal with your fraction. Okay.